So today's topic, one of our personal favorites, something that we talk about all the time, fear paralysis.
Yeah, and I think like thinking about it now, it changes all the time. Like before you're aware of it, once you're aware of it, and after you're aware of it. So I think this fear paralysis is just like a ball of yarn that's just layered upon itself. And there's just so many layers to it, I think.
I agree. I think that a lot of the times, like no matter what, I feel like if you're aware of it, then that's great, but it doesn't change the fact that it still happens because it's one of those like creeper things that comes in and just kind of like situates itself. And I feel like the more you become aware, the more sophisticated it can become because you think you're about it, but I feel like it impacts everyone in its own way. So
Yeah.
like a
So
good
let's go into like what fear paralysis is, because it sounds pretty hefty, and it is. But so fear paralysis itself is just when something is scaring the shit out of you and it paralyzes you from moving forward or taking action. But the tricky part is it's not always masked in fear. It's masked in nervousness or excuses or just plain old, I don't want to do it. And there's just so many masks that fear puts on to prevent you from doing something. Yeah, so that's the tricky part. You never know what mask it has on.
Yeah, essentially it comes across as a justification,
Right.
internal justification for not doing something that you deep down beyond the fear paralysis know you should do because it's going to bring you to where you need to be, wherever that is, that next step.
Right. And that's not to invalidate the fear. The fear is there for a reason. It's not to say that you just got to get over your fear and do it. It's just to highlight that this paralysis that you're feeling, there's an underlying layer to it. And it would be easier for you to kind of dig through to see what the roots are so you can uncover what is preventing you so that you can move forward. So it's not to invalidate the fear or your feelings. Like it's still there, it's still valid. But the work is to uncover why it exists, why it's present.
Like the fight or flight is coded in our DNA, meaning it's not just in response to physical threats, but things that our body perceives to be as a potential danger, so or a risk. So taking a risk like going for a bigger role, bigger job, like owning a company versus managing a company, or going from like a sales position to a management position. A lot of the times, perfect example of fear paralysis is like, well, I don't know if I should take it. Like, I don't have a lot of experience, and maybe I won't make a lot of money, and I don't want to get fired from inexperience, or those are just some like very surface level examples.
Exactly.
But that's like that fight or flight response kicking in. That's when it starts to kick in.
Right.
Because it's like, well, this is a big risk. Like, are you sure you want to manage a group of 20 people instead of just yourself?
Right. And it's a good indicator, this fight or flight reaction. It's a good indicator when there is fear paralysis present, but you might not see it. When you're in this position where you're like, do I do it? The alternative is I don't do it. And you're in this debate of do it or not do it. And usually that is an indicator of if you're scared to do it. Sometimes like fear is good. It'll push you to do things. But when you're scared to do something, it just invites a deeper look to see if you're going to fight for it or flee from it.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you said that, because like a lot of people don't realize that that response is happening, and instead of recognizing that they have to acknowledge the fear, they simply feel the fear and then they're just like, nope, like that's it, like I'm done, I'm not going to do this, whatever this is.
Right. And it takes a lot of self-awareness too, or maybe not a lot, but this begins to cultivate self-awareness of what am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? What's the underlying feeling? So hopefully understanding the definition of fear paralysis, pinpointing when you do feel it in your life, you start to cultivate this self-awareness so that you can, okay, identify the problem and then start to move through it. So that's the point of bringing this up, because I'm sure so many people are feeling it. They might not recognize what it is. They might not have a name for it, but it's very real. It literally paralyzes you from, I don't know, so many things. I feel like I have bubbled myself within a bubble because of fear paralysis. So it's like when you're bowling and for kids, they put those blockades so it doesn't go in the gutter. That's how I have made my life due to fear paralysis. So it's so real that I've started blockading myself just to this one safe path. And that is a direct result of what fear paralysis can do to you if you're not aware that it's directing your life.
One of the examples of fear paralysis for myself was when I started Harborfront. I started it in 2017, and I didn't want anyone to know that it was my company. I didn't want to talk about it when my friends, like if I had mentioned it to like a friend and they asked me questions, I would get really defensive. Not necessarily outwardly, but I would just like close up, wouldn't want to talk about it. A lot of that was like fear. I was afraid that like, well, like, what if it fails as a company, or what if I change my mind, or like if I say too much, it makes it seem permanent, and like what if I pivot and go another direction, or whatever the case was. I just felt really vulnerable because it was me and the company. Like we're one. It's not like I work for this company and there's all these layers, and it's not my heart, it's not my thought, it's not my action. So that's kind of, and I didn't for so long, I want to say like a year, maybe longer, I didn't talk about it, I didn't tell anyone about it. Well, I told like 5 people about it. And, as a result, the business was obviously suffering because I wasn't doing anything to promote it, because I was like literally paralyzed by fear. I didn't want to create any content. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to share. So there's my example. One of many, but that was the most prevalent one, I want to say, and most recent.
Right. So, like, it shows up in a lot of ways, in a lot of big ways. In your case, exclaiming to the world that you have this new project, which by any means is a big thing. Like, there's valid reason to have fear paralysis for that. That's a big thing. But fear paralysis, like you've mentioned before, it can show up in really small examples too. Like, should I take this managerial position, right? Like, that happens in most people's lives. Like, you're going to take a new job, you're going to take a new position, you're leaving your company, you're trying something new, even if it's a hobby. Like, it can show up in tiny, tiny ways in so many um, relevant, relevant forms.
What are some ways that you can identify fear paralysis? And then what are some ways that you can start to reverse that process? We can speak from our experiences.
Yeah. So it's like after therapy and doing the work and bringing this up with people like you so I can bounce back and forth, what I've started doing is whenever I'm posed with a decision, whether I go for it or not, or anything like that, and I find myself saying I don't want to do it, I sit with that decision and I just like sit with it and meditate with it. And I just make the decision to not do it and see how that feels. And then with like grace, I slowly uncover why I don't want to do this. Is it truly because I don't want to do this? It has no interest in me? Or is it because I'm fearful and that's making me feel like I don't want to do it? So one of my tactics now is to sit with the decision that I've made and see if it's fear-based. but that involves like time, meditation, and just like truthfulness to myself instead of just jumping straight into it and see what happens. So like for me lately, it's just been like, okay, I've made the decision. That's cool. Let me sit with it and see if it feels comfortable. And then that will help me start to uncover what it is I'm truly feeling. I try to spend like at least a day or two in it. If by that time I'm still unsure, then I don't do it. Because for me, I'm against doing something that I physically do not feel ready for. So, and there have been instances where it was fear paralysis and I just pushed through and it did not happen well. And it's because I know my body was like, yes, it's fear and it's real. Don't do it right now. You're not ready. And I just went for it. And my body was like, I told you I was not ready for it. So though fear paralysis is real, you need to work through it. I don't force myself to do anything that I know I'm not ready for, even if it is fear-based. So I sit with it for as long as I feel like I'm ready to inch towards it. If by the time that decision needs to be made and I still don't have enough time, I just don't do it. And I just know that that wasn't an opportunity for me because I wasn't physically ready for it.
So for me, like I guess a lot of this has to do with just experience that I've gone through like early on in life. So I've been in touch with my gut, like my gut feeling. Some people call it intuition. I'm sure there's other names for it. I just call it my gut feeling. And it's the only piece of advice that I ever really like to give people. I trust my gut. If my gut is telling me to do something, I do it. If it's telling me not to do something, I don't do it. It's quite simple. It doesn't usually take me that long to make a decision because I spent a lot of time with my gut. And I realized like my fight or flight response, like that's your gut. That's like that gut check. Like if that, my gut is telling me like, oh, like, you know, like this person's bad news, don't hang out with them. I'm not going to hang out with them. And so far it has yet to steer me wrong. I found that when I go against my gut is when I made the biggest, or when I've had the biggest regrets. I don't really want to call them regrets because I have learned from them. They've been great learning experiences, but a perfect example is like, you know, I knew that I had to create content or like put Harborfront out there. And my gut was telling me to do that. And I was like, no, nope, I'm not ready. I don't want to be vulnerable like that. Like that's just, I'm not ready to expose myself in that way. And then as soon as I did, surprise, surprise, just like my gut was telling me, everything just started to unfold the way it needed to. So yeah.
Right. And I think what's interesting is we both have mentioned our processes of how to behave in the face of fear paralysis. And both of our tactics involve listening to the body, which again is self-awareness and something I've had to truly work on. Like I must actively work on tuning into my body because for me, I feel like that intuition gut check thing, it's been a really long time since I was like, ooh, that's my gut feeling, got it. So for you, has it always been really easy to discern what your gut is telling you? Or did you have to like practice that? You know what I mean?
It was easy. And I think the reason why it was easy is because I feel like because my experiences came from when I was younger, the first time that I've had to check my gut and, you know, follow it was when I was younger. My mind was more pliable. So it just became a habit for me. And it was something like, I do consider myself fortunate to have gone through what I've gone through. But like my mom always used to say to me, like, you know, listen, trust your gut. Like you have, like she told me, like you have that tool. Like that was her saying, like you have that tool. I don't think she realized the weight of her words, but you know, her telling me that really, like from a young age, really helped me to discern things really quickly. And that's like a lot of that is why I've become very successful in my career at such a young age, is because I was able to just make those decisions and discern things that other people honestly can't or won't or don't want to or whatever. So yeah, it has been easy for me, at least for when it counted anyway.
Yeah. And I think that's great because if you're able to keep that that discernment, that knowing of what my gut feeling feels like from a young age, because that's when you are most intuitive. So if you're able to keep that intuition into adulthood, that's great. I want to say for most people, we lose track of that and we lose that ability to understand, okay, is it my gut or is it my brain telling me that this is bad? You know, like if I'm walking down a dark alley, is it my brain saying, hey, it's a dark alley, don't go here? Or is it my gut being like, this is unsafe? And for those people, I consider myself one of those people that have lost that connection. And for those people who have, my biggest advice is put yourself in situations, not unsafe or bad situations, but put yourself in situations where you have a very visceral reaction. So go to a birthday party where everything is joyous and you know you're going to be happy. Feel how your body feels. Do you get butterflies? So when we put ourselves in positions where we know we're going to have a very visible reaction, that's how we start to learn to attune to our bodies. And that's how we get into the practice of learning what a gut check is, to kind of lead us, to direct us when we are in fear paralysis or other situations where we need to just trust our intuition.
You said something that made me think, like, because you said the word unsafe. Don't put yourself in an unsafe situation, which
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree with. But I think people don't really realize or understand the difference between unsafe and uncomfortable. Put yourself in uncomfortable positions. I do believe, like, wholeheartedly, you know how much I love to do this to myself. I do believe wholeheartedly that putting yourself in more uncomfortable situations really, really helps you to build that skill, because it is a skill just like anything else. It's a muscle or a muscle, whatever you want to call it. It's something that needs to be built and grown and developed and nurtured, just like everything else. So the more you put yourself out there in uncomfortable situations, again, uncomfortable is different from unsafe.
Right.
Uncomfortable situations, I think the better you'll become at handling those things. I mean, you accept that risk, you determine what that risk is going to be. I'm not saying that if you're like someone who's, is used to staying at home all day, working in a cubicle, to go to like a rave, I don't know, like you decide what that looks like for you. But I do believe that you have to become uncomfortable in order to grow like that. I don't think that's a negotiable. That's just my opinion.
Right. And that, even the feeling of like discomfort could be a sign of fear paralysis. Like if you are uncomfortable doing something, you know, again, it's that work to determine, is it really because I don't like this, or is there fear of judgment, fear of trying this that you had a bad experience with? So I do agree, get out of your comfort zone. Um, so much easier said than done for sure.
Yeah, it takes a while, like especially if you're doing this as an adult, like it's going to take time. You have to be patient with yourself.
Right. But it's almost a sure sign that when you are approaching your comfort zone and something feels weird, that's when you should really take out like your magnifying glass and be like, is this fear paralysis?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, why is it I'm uncomfortable in this moment? Is it because the people around me are like bad people? Or is it because I've simply never been in this environment before? I'm unfamiliar with, people who are so happy and joyous, as you described, like at a birthday party. Or is it because, yeah, like the environment is dirty? Like you have to be specific.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm. If you can think of an example of when fear paralysis has affected your life, or if it's affecting you right now, please feel free to like leave a comment and start a discussion. We'll chime in when we can, or other people will. I'm really interested, and I know Irene is too, to see how this is affecting other people. Next step.